The year was 2347 and humanity had spread across 12 star systems. They built colonies on distant worlds and sent ships into the darkness between stars. They searched for alien life but found nothing. Most people believed humans were alone in the universe. They were wrong. Captain Daniel Cole stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and watched the stars through the main viewport. He was a tall man, with gray at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too many empty worlds. His ship was an exploration vessel tasked with mapping the outer rim of the Kepler system. It was supposed to be a quiet mission. It was supposed to be safe. The distress signal came at 0300 hours. Commander Kate Morrison was the first to detect it. She was a sharp woman with short dark hair and a mind that worked faster than most computers. She traced the signal to a point near the system's edge, and her face went pale. "Captain," she said, "the signal is coming from 3 ships. Colony transports. They were carrying 8,000 civilians to the new settlement on Kepler 7. Daniel felt ice form in his chest. Colony ships did not send distress signals unless something had gone terribly wrong. He ordered the Defiance to maximum speed, and they crossed the distance in 4 hours. What they found when they arrived changed everything. The 3 colony ships were broken. Their hulls had been torn open, and their engines were dark. Bodies floated in the void between the wreckage. Daniel had seen death before, but nothing like this. This was not an accident. This was an attack. Kate spotted it first. A ship unlike anything in human records hung motionless above the debris. It was long and silver with curves that seemed wrong to human eyes. Lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that made no sense. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. "I am detecting life signs aboard the alien vessel," Kate said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Human life signs. Captain, there are humans on that ship." Before Daniel could respond, the alien vessel turned toward them. A beam of light struck the Defiance, and the ship shook like a toy in a giant's hand. Alarms screamed. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Daniel was thrown to the deck and felt blood running down his face. The attack lasted less than a minute. When it ended, the Defiance was crippled. Engines were offline. Weapons were destroyed. Shields had failed completely. Daniel pulled himself up and saw figures materializing on his bridge. They were tall and thin with gray skin and eyes like black pools. They moved with a strange grace that made his skin crawl. The aliens did not speak. They simply pointed at crew members, and those crew members vanished in flashes of light. Daniel tried to fight, but something hit him from behind and everything went dark. When he woke, the aliens were gone. 17 of his crew had been taken, including Dr. Sam Wheeler, the ship's chief xenobiologist. Sam was a brilliant woman who had spent her entire career hoping to meet alien life. Now she had, and Daniel feared what that meeting would cost her. Kate had survived. She had hidden in a maintenance shaft when the aliens boarded, and they had not found her. Together they managed to restore partial power to the Defiance. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of limping through space in a broken ship. 3 weeks of wondering what had happened to their captured crew. Daniel brought something with him. During the chaos of the attack, he had found a small crystal lying on the deck. It must have fallen from one of the aliens. He kept it hidden and said nothing about it until they reached Earth. Admiral Patricia Grant met them at the orbital station. She was a woman in her 60s, with iron-gray hair, and a reputation for being the toughest officer in the fleet. She listened to Daniel's report without interrupting. When he finished, she was silent for a long time. "You are telling me that aliens attacked a human ship and took prisoners," she said. "You are telling me that first contact has happened, and it was an act of war." Daniel placed the crystal on her desk. "I am telling you more than that, Admiral. I am telling you, we need to know what is on this." The crystal was taken to the best cryptographers on Earth. It took them 6 days to break the encryption. What they found inside made Patricia Grant call an emergency session of the United Earth Council. What they found inside made grown men weep with rage. The aliens were called the Korath. They were part of something called the Korath Dominion that spanned hundreds of star systems. They had been watching humanity for over 200 years. They had studied human technology and human biology and human society. They had catalogued everything about the species that called itself human. And they had done this for one reason. The Korath were slavers. They had conquered and enslaved over 40 sentient species across the galaxy. They used these slaves in mines and factories and places too terrible to describe. Some species they had owned for thousands of years. Some species had forgotten they were ever free. Humanity was next on their list. The data crystal contained records of abductions going back decades. Thousands of humans had been taken from remote colonies and isolated stations. They had been listed as accidents or disappearances. No one had known the truth. No one had suspected that monsters were hunting them in the dark. Daniel Cole stood before the United Earth Council and told them what the crystal contained. He told them about the 40 enslaved species. He told them about the centuries of horror. He told them that the Korath had never faced a species that knew they were coming. Every other civilization they had conquered had been surprised and overwhelmed. "We are not surprised," Daniel said. "We know they are coming. We know what they want. And we know something else. The Korath are not warriors. They are merchants and opportunists. They have never faced a species that fought back with everything it had." Admiral Patricia Grant stood beside him. Her eyes were hard as stone, and her voice was cold as space. "Then we will be the first," she said. "We will show these slavers what happens when they try to put chains on humanity. We will find them. We will break them. And we will free every soul they have ever stolen." The war for humanity's future had begun. The news spread across human space like fire through dry grass. Every colony and every station learned what the Korath had done. They learned about the abductions and the slave empires and the centuries of watching from the shadows. Fear came first, then anger, then something harder and colder than both. Admiral Patricia Grant did not waste time on speeches or politics. She gave orders and expected them to be followed. Daniel Cole was promoted to Commodore and given command of a new task force. His mission was simple: build a fleet capable of fighting the Korath and build it fast. Kate Morrison was assigned to intelligence work. She spent her days in dark rooms filled with screens and data streams. Lieutenant Nathan Perry worked beside her. He was a young man with quick hands and a mind that could find patterns in chaos. Together they dug deeper into the Korath database, and what they found gave humanity its first real hope. The Korath were not soldiers. They were traders who dealt in living beings the way other merchants dealt in ore or grain. Their ships were built for speed and surprise, not for prolonged battle. Their weapons were designed to disable and capture, not to destroy. They had never fought a war because they had never needed to. Every species they conquered had been caught off guard and overwhelmed before they could organize a defense. Kate brought this information to Admiral Grant. The old woman read the reports, and a thin smile crossed her face. "They are bullies," Patricia said. "They attack the weak and the unprepared. They have never met a species that was ready for them." "We can be ready," Kate said. "We know their tactics now. We know their technology. We know how they think." "Then make sure we are ready," Patricia replied. "Because when they come for us again, we will not be victims. We will be the hunters." While Kate worked on intelligence, Daniel worked on building his fleet. Ships were pulled from every corner of human space. Cargo haulers were converted into troop transports. Mining vessels were fitted with weapons. Every shipyard in 12 systems worked day and night to produce warships. Engineer Paul Hendricks led the team that studied Korath technology. He was a quiet man who spoke more to machines than to people. The captured data crystal contained schematics for Korath shields and weapons. Paul worked for weeks without sleep and finally achieved a breakthrough. He figured out how to match Korath shield frequencies. Human weapons could now punch through defenses that had stopped them before. But Patricia Grant wanted more. She visited Paul in his laboratory and stood over his shoulder while he worked. "Matching their shields is good," she said. "But I want weapons that will make them afraid. I want them to see a human ship and know that death is coming for them." Paul looked at her with red eyes and nodded slowly. He went back to work and did not emerge for another month. When he did, he brought designs for a new type of warhead. It used principles from the Korath database combined with human nuclear technology. The result was a weapon that could crack a planet if necessary. Patricia approved the design immediately. Far away on a world called Korath 7, Dr. Sam Wheeler learned what it meant to be a slave. The mining colony was built into the side of a mountain. Thousands of beings from a dozen species worked in the tunnels below. They dug for precious metals that the Korath sold across the galaxy. They worked until they collapsed and then they were replaced. Sam was put to work in the processing facility. Her hands bled from handling rough ore and her back ached from hours of standing. The Korath guards watched everything with cold black eyes. They did not speak to the slaves except to give orders. They did not see the slaves as people. They saw them as tools to be used and discarded. But Sam saw something else. She saw beings who had been broken but not destroyed. She saw sparks of defiance in eyes that were supposed to be empty. She began talking to the other slaves during the brief rest periods. She learned their languages and their histories. She learned that many of them remembered freedom, even if they had never tasted it themselves. There was a Valari named Torek who had been a scientist before his capture. There was a Mindari female called Seren who had once led armies. There were humans who had been taken years ago and had given up hope of rescue. Sam gathered them together in secret meetings held in dark corners of the facility. The Korath are not gods, she told them. They are just creatures who have never been challenged. They have never faced beings who refuse to bow. We can be those beings. We can show them that slaves can become warriors. Torek looked at her with his large silver eyes. You speak of rebellion. The Korath have crushed every uprising in their history. They have crushed uprisings that were disorganized and hopeless, Sam replied. They have never faced a rebellion that was planned and coordinated. They have never faced a rebellion that was connected to every slave world in their empire. Seren leaned forward. Her scales glittered in the dim light. You want to build a network. You want slaves on every world to be ready to rise when the moment comes. Yes, Sam said. And I know that moment is coming. Humanity knows about the Korath now. My people will not rest until they have torn this empire apart. When they come, we need to be ready to help them. The network grew slowly. Messages were passed in whispers and hidden symbols. Slaves who had given up found new purpose. Guards who were not as loyal as they seemed began to look the other way. The Korath did not notice because they could not imagine that their property might have thoughts of freedom. Back on Earth, the human liberation fleet was taking shape. 40 warships gathered at the edge of the solar system. Their crews trained day and night for combat against an enemy they had never faced. Commodore Daniel Cole stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the USS Reckoning, and looked at the fleet he had built. Kate Morrison joined him at the viewport. Intelligence reports that the Korath have a slave depot on the edge of their territory. It holds thousands of captives, including humans taken over the past decade. Daniel turned to face her. How soon can we strike? The fleet will be ready in 2 weeks. Daniel nodded slowly. He thought about Sam Wheeler and the other crew members who had been taken from the Defiance. He thought about the thousands of humans who had vanished over the years. He thought about the 40 species that had been ground down into nothing by Korath chains. 2 weeks, he said. And then we start taking back what they stole. The liberation was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the attack on the Defiance. 6 months of building and planning and preparing for a fight that would change the galaxy forever. The human liberation fleet hung in the darkness between stars and waited for the order to move. Commodore Daniel Cole stood on the bridge of the USS Reckoning and studied the tactical display. 40 human warships were arranged in attack formation. Their crews were ready. Their weapons were charged. Their hearts were full of cold anger. All ships report ready, Kate Morrison said from her station. The Korath depot is 2 hours away at maximum speed. Intelligence suggests they have 12 defensive vessels and approximately 50 ground troops. Daniel nodded. And how many captives? Over 8,000. Humans and members of at least 6 other species. 8,000 lives hanging in the balance. 8,000 souls waiting to be freed or condemned. Daniel felt the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. Every decision he made in the next few hours would determine whether those people lived or died. Signal the fleet, he said. "We go in fast and hard. No mercy for slavers." The human liberation fleet jumped to faster than light speed and crossed the void in silence. When they emerged, they found the Korath depot exactly where intelligence had predicted. It was a massive station built into an asteroid. Docking ports lined its surface, and storage bays bulged with cargo both living and otherwise. 12 Korath warships patrolled the perimeter with lazy confidence. The Korath detected the human fleet immediately. Their communications channels erupted with confused chatter. They had never seen human warships before. They had never imagined that the species they planned to enslave would come to them first. Daniel gave the order to attack. Human tactics were born from centuries of warfare against each other. Humans had fought on land and sea and in the air. They had developed strategies for every kind of combat imaginable. They knew how to feint and flank and overwhelm. They knew how to turn an enemy's strength into weakness. The Korath knew none of this. They fought like merchants defending cargo. They grouped their ships together and tried to form a defensive line. It was exactly what Daniel had expected. "Wolfpack formation," he ordered. "Break them apart." The human fleet split into smaller groups that struck from multiple directions at once. Korath shields flared and failed under concentrated fire. One enemy ship exploded, and then another. The defensive line shattered into chaos as Korath captains tried to respond to threats coming from everywhere at once. The battle lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, all 12 Korath warships were destroyed or disabled. The human fleet had lost 2 ships and suffered damage to 5 others. It was a victory beyond anything Daniel had dared to hope for. Kate Morrison led the ground assault personally. She had requested the assignment, and Patricia Grant had approved it. Kate wanted to look into the eyes of slavers and show them what humanity thought of their trade. 300 Marines followed her through the docking port. They moved through the station's corridors with weapons ready and eyes alert. Korath guards tried to stop them and died where they stood. The aliens were not prepared for close combat against beings who had been fighting each other for thousands of years. Kate reached the slave pens in the heart of the station. The doors were sealed and reinforced. A Korath officer stood before them with a weapon pointed at his own head. "Come closer and I will kill myself," the alien said in broken human language. "Then you will never find the codes to open the pens. The slaves will die in there." Kate stopped walking. She looked at the alien with cold eyes. "You think we need your codes?" She gestured to one of her Marines. The man stepped forward with a cutting tool and began slicing through the door's hinges. The Korath officer watched with growing horror as his leverage disappeared. "You cannot do this," he said. "The codes are the only way." "We are humans," Kate replied. "We always find another way." The door fell inward with a crash. Behind it lay a vast chamber filled with cages and chains. Thousands of beings looked up with eyes that had forgotten hope. They saw human soldiers standing in the doorway with weapons in their hands and freedom on their lips. Kate stepped inside and raised her voice so all could hear. "You are free. The slavers cannot hurt you anymore. We have come to take you home." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then a woman pushed through the crowd. She was thin and scarred, and her hair had gone gray before its time. But her eyes burned with a fire that captivity had not extinguished. "Kate," Sam Wheeler said, "I knew you would come." Kate embraced her old friend and felt tears running down her face. "We never stopped looking. We never stopped fighting." Sam pulled back and looked at the soldiers around them. "You have done more than you know. This is not just a rescue. This is a signal. Every slave in Korath space will hear about this. Every being in chains will know that someone came for us." The liberation of the depot took 3 days. The freed captives were transported to human ships and given food and medical care and kindness they had not known for years. Sam Wheeler worked tirelessly to help them adjust. She translated languages and soothed fears and answered endless questions about the humans who had come to save them. But she also shared information. The resistance network she had built was larger than anyone had imagined. Slaves on dozens of worlds were ready to rise when given the signal. They had weapons hidden in secret places. They had plans for taking control of key facilities. They only needed to know that hope was real. Daniel Cole listened to her reports with growing amazement. This woman, who had been captured and enslaved, had done more damage to the Korath than all his warships combined. She had planted seeds of rebellion that would bloom into fire. "The Korath will respond to this attack," Daniel said. "They will not let it stand." Sam nodded. "They will come for Earth. They will try to crush humanity before the rebellion spreads. It is the only move they have left. Then we will be ready for them." News of the liberation spread through Korath space faster than light. Slaves whispered the story to each other in the darkness of their cells. Humans had come, humans had fought, humans had won. The masters were not invincible after all. The Korath High Merchant Council met in emergency session. For the first time in their history, they faced a threat they could not ignore. They made a decision that would commit their entire civilization to war. A fleet of 300 warships was assembled. It was the largest military force the Korath Dominion had ever deployed. Every ship they could spare was called to service. Every weapon they possessed was loaded and ready. Their destination was Earth. Their mission was extinction. They would wipe humanity from existence and use the ashes as a warning to every slave who dreamed of freedom. The final battle was coming. The Korath Armada entered the Sol system expecting easy prey. 300 warships flew in tight formation with weapons charged and shields at maximum. The High Merchant Admiral stood on his command bridge and looked at the distant yellow sun that humans called home. He imagined the terror that must be gripping the primitive species below. He imagined their desperate prayers to gods who would not answer. He was wrong about everything. Admiral Patricia Grant had spent months preparing for this moment. She knew the Korath would come for Earth eventually. She knew they would bring overwhelming force, and she knew that humans had faced overwhelming force before and found ways to win. The outer defenses were hidden throughout the asteroid belt, weapons platforms disguised as rocks, missile batteries buried beneath ice, sensor stations scattered across millions of miles of empty space. The Korath saw nothing because they were not looking. They had never needed to look before. Lieutenant Nathan Perry commanded the stealth frigates that waited in the shadow of Jupiter. He was young for such responsibility, but he had proven himself in the liberation of the slave depot. Now he watched his screens and counted enemy ships and felt no fear at all. "All units report ready," his communications officer said. "The enemy fleet is entering the engagement zone." Nathan smiled. "Then let us welcome them properly." 20 stealth frigates emerged from hiding and struck the rear of the Korath formation. Their weapons were the new designs that Paul Hendricks had created. Each shot punched through Korath shields like paper. Enemy ships exploded in blinding flashes before they could even turn to face the threat. The ambush threw the Korath into chaos. Ships broke formation trying to engage attackers they could barely see. The tight fleet became a scattered mob. The High Merchant Admiral screamed orders that no one followed. Nathan pulled his frigates back before the enemy could organize a response. His mission was not to destroy the Korath fleet. His mission was to wound it and slow it down and make it bleed. He had accomplished all 3 objectives in under 10 minutes. Commodore Daniel Cole led the main human fleet in a fighting retreat toward Earth. 60 warships faced 300. But Daniel did not plan to fight fair. He planned to fight smart. Every asteroid they passed concealed a missile battery that fired as the Korath went by. Every moon hid a squadron of fighters that struck and vanished. The enemy lost ships by the dozen as they advanced. The Korath had never experienced anything like this. They were used to terrified species that surrendered at the first sign of resistance. They were used to easy victories against enemies who did not know how to fight. Humans were neither terrified nor ignorant. Humans had been fighting since they first picked up rocks and sticks. War was in their blood. The High Merchant Admiral lost patience. He ordered his remaining ships to maximum speed regardless of losses. He wanted to reach Earth before his entire fleet was destroyed by ambushes. He wanted to burn the human homeworld and end this nightmare forever. The final battle took place in Earth orbit. 200 Korath ships emerged from faster-than-light travel to find a wall of human warships waiting for them. Behind that wall was Earth itself, blue and green and beautiful. 8 billion humans looked up at the sky and trusted their defenders to keep them safe. Kate Morrison commanded the ground-based defense grid. Massive weapons platforms dotted the surface of the planet. Orbital stations bristled with missile launchers and energy cannons. Every major city had shield generators that could withstand bombardment. Earth was a fortress that had been preparing for this moment since the day the Korath were discovered. Daniel Cole faced the enemy fleet with the USS Reckoning at the tip of his formation. His voice was calm when he spoke to his crews. They came here to enslave us. They came here to break us. They came here to add humanity to their collection of conquered species. Today we show them what happens when they reach for chains and find swords instead. Today we fight for every human who was taken in the night. Today we fight for every species that has suffered under Korath rule. Today we fight, and we do not stop until every slaver ship is burning. The battle began with a missile barrage that darkened the sky. Thousands of warheads streaked toward the Korath fleet, and thousands more streaked back. Shields flared and failed. Ships exploded in silent fireballs. The void between Earth and Moon became a killing ground of fire and metal. Daniel drove the Reckoning straight at the enemy flagship. It was the largest Korath vessel ever built, a massive warship that had never known defeat. The High Merchant Admiral stood on its bridge and watched the human ship approaching with something like disbelief. No enemy had ever dared to challenge him directly. "All weapons on that ship," the Admiral ordered. "Destroy them." The Korath flagship opened fire with everything it had. The Reckoning's shields buckled under the assault. Hull breaches opened across the ship. Crew members died at their stations. But Daniel did not turn away. He kept coming. "Signal the fleet," he said through gritted teeth. "Concentrate all fire on the enemy flagship. Now." Time. 20 human ships responded. Their weapons struck the Korath flagship simultaneously. The enemy shields collapsed under the combined assault. Armor plating melted and tore away. Explosions rippled across the massive hull as systems failed one after another. The High Merchant Admiral watched his ship die around him. He watched his screens fill with damage reports and casualty lists. He watched the human warship still coming toward him through the fire. In that moment he understood something that Korath had never grasped before. Humans did not fight to win. Humans fought to survive, and there was nothing more dangerous in the universe than a species fighting for its survival. The Korath flagship exploded in a ball of white fire. The shockwave pushed ships away in all directions. The command structure of the Korath fleet died with it. Enemy captains found themselves alone and leaderless against an enemy that showed no mercy. Kate Morrison watched from Earth as the Korath fleet began to break. Some ships tried to surrender. Some tried to flee. Most simply died in the crossfire of a battle they had never truly understood. Sam Wheeler broadcast a message to every enslaved species in Korath space. Her voice carried across thousands of light years through the resistance networks she had built. It was a simple message, but it changed everything. The slavers are losing. Their fleet is destroyed. Their leaders are dead. The time has come. Rise up, fight back, be free. The battle for Earth ended at sunset. 200 Korath ships had entered the solar system. Fewer than 30 escaped. The rest were scattered across the void as wreckage and memory. Daniel Cole stood on the damaged bridge of the Reckoning and looked down at the planet he had saved. Cities glittered with lights below. People were celebrating in the streets. Humanity had faced its greatest threat and triumphed. But Daniel knew the war was not over. It was just beginning. The Korath Dominion collapsed faster than anyone had predicted. The destruction of their fleet at Earth was only the beginning. Sam Wheeler's message had reached every slave world in their empire. Beings who had been crushed for generations suddenly remembered that they had once been free. They remembered that they had once been proud. And they rose. On Korath Prime, the slaves in the processing plants seized control of the power grid. On Korath 7, the miners that Sam had organized took over the entire facility in a single night. On 100 worlds across 1,000 light-years, the chains broke and the masters fell. The Korath had built their civilization on slavery. When the slaves refused to serve, the civilization crumbled to dust. Admiral Patricia Grant watched reports come in from across the galaxy and felt something she had not felt in decades. Hope. Not hope for survival, because that battle was won. Hope for something greater. Hope for a galaxy that could be healed. She convened a meeting of the surviving leaders of the liberated species. They gathered on Earth in a great hall that had once hosted the United Nations. Representatives of 12 species sat together for the first time in history. They had all been slaves. They had all been freed. Now they would decide what came next. Patricia stood before them and spoke with a voice that carried the weight of everything humanity had learned. We did not ask for this war. We did not know the Korath existed until they attacked us. But once we knew the truth, we could not look away. We could not pretend that slavery was acceptable as long as it happened to others. We fought for ourselves, and we fought for all of you. Now we must build something together. Something that will ensure no species ever faces chains again. Torek the Valari rose to speak. He had been a scientist before his capture, and he had survived the mines of Korath 7. Now he represented his people in this new assembly. My species was enslaved for 300 years. We forgot what freedom meant. We forgot that we had ever walked beneath our own sky. Humans reminded us. Humans came into the darkness and carried light with them. We will stand with humanity in whatever comes next. Saren the Mindari spoke after him. Her scales gleamed under the lights, and her voice was strong despite everything she had endured. The Mindari were warriors once. The Korath broke us and made us forget, but you cannot break what lives in the blood. Humans reminded us who we were. We will fight beside them until the last slaver is dust. One by one, the representatives pledged their support. The Galactic Liberation Alliance was born in that hall. Its purpose was simple: to hunt down the remaining Korath leadership, to free any slaves still in chains, to build a galaxy where sentient beings could live without fear of being treated as property. Patricia Grant was named the first commander of the Alliance. She accepted the responsibility with clear eyes and steady hands. She had led humanity through its darkest hour. Now she would lead a coalition of species into a brighter future. Commodore Daniel Cole was given command of the Alliance's first joint fleet. His flagship was a new vessel built with technology from a dozen worlds. Its crew was drawn from every liberated species. Humans served alongside Valari and Mindari, and beings whose names they were still learning to pronounce. Daniel's mission was to track down the surviving Korath leaders. Many had fled when their empire collapsed. They hid in remote systems and ancient fortresses. They gathered what forces remained loyal to them and plotted revenge. Daniel hunted them without mercy and without rest. Dr. Sam Wheeler became the Alliance's chief ambassador. She traveled between worlds, helping former slave species rebuild their societies. She understood trauma in a way that others could not. She had lived in the darkness and found her way back to the light. She showed others how to make the same journey. Sam visited worlds that had known nothing but suffering for centuries. She helped them establish governments and schools and hospitals. She translated between species that had never spoken to each other as equals. She planted seeds of cooperation that would grow into something beautiful. Commander Kate Morrison took charge of Alliance intelligence. She built networks that spanned hundreds of star systems. Her agents watched for any sign of new slaver activity. Her analysts studied the galaxy for threats that might be lurking in the shadows. Kate swore that humanity would never be caught off guard again. She found evidence that other slaver civilizations existed beyond Korath space. They were distant, and they were cautious. They had seen what happened to the Korath, and they were afraid. Kate's networks reached toward them like tendrils of awareness. She wanted to know everything about them before they decided to test the Alliance. Captain Nathan Perry led the exploration corps that ventured into uncharted space. His mission was to find new civilizations before anyone else did. He carried messages of friendship and offers of protection. He showed species who had never known conflict that predators existed in the darkness, but that they did not have to face those predators alone. Nathan discovered wonders beyond imagination. Species that sang their histories in frequencies humans could barely hear. Civilizations that built their cities in the hearts of dying stars. Beings that existed partially in dimensions humans could not perceive. He welcomed them all to the Alliance, and promised them that the galaxy was safer now than it had ever been. Years passed, and the Alliance grew stronger. Former slaves became citizens, and then leaders. Species that had been enemies learned to trust each other. The scars of Korath rule slowly healed, as new generations were born into freedom. Daniel Cole retired from active command when he turned 70. His hair was white and his body was tired, but his eyes still held the fire that had carried him through the war. He settled on a world that had once been a Korath slave colony. Children played in streets that had known only suffering a decade before. Families built homes where cages had once stood. Sam Wheeler visited him there on a warm afternoon. They sat together on a hillside and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" Sam asked. "That first attack, the defiance, everything we lost." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think about it every day. I think about the crew members who died. I think about the years you spent in chains. I think about all the people we could not save, but we saved so many more. We did. We saved more than I ever imagined possible." Sam looked at the children playing below. They were human, and Valari and Mindari all mixed together. They did not see differences because they had grown up knowing only friendship. "The Korath thought they understood humanity," she said. "They studied us for 200 years. They cataloged our weaknesses and our fears. They thought they knew what we were. They were wrong. They were so wrong. They saw that we fought each other and they thought we were divided. They did not understand that we fight because we care. We fight for things that matter to us. We fight for people we love. We fight for ideas we believe in. And when we find something worth fighting for together, we become unstoppable." Daniel watched a human child help a Valari child climb a tree. They were laughing in languages that neither fully understood but both clearly felt. "The Korath discovered the truth about humanity too late," he said. "They learned that we do not surrender. We do not submit. We do not accept chains for ourselves or for anyone else. When we saw the galaxy in bondage, we did not look away. We broke the bonds and set everyone free. And now we build. Now we protect. Now we make sure that what happened to the Korath slaves never happens again." Sam smiled and leaned back against the grass. The stars were beginning to appear as the sky darkened. Each point of light was a sun with worlds around it. Many of those worlds were free because of what humanity had done. "I used to wonder if there was life out there," Sam said. "I spent my whole career hoping to find aliens. I imagined what they might be like. I dreamed about first contact. And then first contact tried to enslave us. It did, and we responded by liberating the galaxy." She laughed softly. "That was not what I imagined, but I think it was better. We did not just find alien life. We saved it. We became the protectors of beings we never knew existed. We became the hope of species that had forgotten what hope meant." Daniel stood and offered her his hand. The last light of sunset was fading, and the night was coming. "We became what we always were," he said. "We became human, and that was enough to change everything." They walked down the hillside together toward a village full of free people from a dozen worlds. Behind them, the stars shone bright and cold in the endless dark. Somewhere out there, new threats were gathering, new challenges were waiting, but humanity would face them. Humanity would always face them, because that is what humans do.